My girlfriend said, "It was just texting. Nothing physical happened." I said, "Then you won't mind if I read them out loud to everyone at your sister's wedding." She minded. Everyone found out anyway. The groom was very interested since the texts were with his brother and his wife. OPS. All right, Reddit, buckle up because this one's a doozy. My girlfriend of 3 years tried to gaslight me about some innocent texting with another guy. Turns out that guy was her future brother-in-law's brother. And his wife had some thoughts about it too. Here's how a wedding became the most expensive therapy session her family never asked for. I'm Nate, 29 male, and I work as a fleet maintenance supervisor for a regional trucking company here in North Carolina. Basically, I manage a team that keeps about 40 trucks running smoothly. It's not glamorous, but it pays well. I've got great benefits, and I actually enjoy solving problems. There's something satisfying about diagnosing what's wrong with a machine and fixing it. Wish people were that straightforward. My days start early, usually at the shop by 6 in the morning going over work orders and prioritizing which trucks need immediate attention. I've got 6 mechanics under me, all solid guys who know their stuff, and we keep a pretty tight operation. Fleet downtime costs money, so we don't mess around with delays. My boss always says I run the tightest maintenance schedule he's ever seen. That attention to detail carries over into my personal life too, which is either a strength or a flaw depending on who you ask. Been living in the same town since I graduated from community college with my diesel mechanic certification. Got a decent house I bought 3 years ago. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. 2 bedrooms, a garage that's become my personal workshop, and a backyard where my dog Rex likes to chase squirrels he'll never catch. Golden retriever with more enthusiasm than coordination, but that's why I love him. The house was a foreclosure that needed work, which is exactly why I could afford it. Spent my first year there replacing the floors, updating the electrical, and turning the attached garage into a legitimate workspace with proper lighting and tool storage. There's something deeply satisfying about building equity with your own 2 hands. Every improvement I made felt like an investment in my future, a foundation for whatever came next. I met my girlfriend Brianna at a friend's birthday party about 3.5 years ago. She was working as an administrative assistant at a dental office, had this infectious laugh, and seemed genuinely interested in what I did for a living. Most women I'd dated before her would glaze over when I talked about torque specs and engine diagnostics, but Brianna asked questions, or at least she pretended to. That first night, we stayed at the party talking for 3 hours straight. She told me about growing up with divorced parents, about wanting to go back to school eventually, about her dreams of maybe owning her own business someday. I talked about my work, my house renovation projects, my dog. We exchanged numbers and went on our first date that following weekend. The early days were good. Really good. She'd show up at my shop sometimes with lunch, impressed by the organized chaos of keeping a fleet running. I'd take her to nice dinners and actually plan things in advance instead of just winging it like I'd done in previous relationships. She seemed to appreciate that I was stable, responsible, the kind of guy who remembered anniversaries and showed up when he said he would. Looking back, I realized she was more interested in the stability I represented than in me as a person. But when you're in the middle of it, you don't see those things clearly. You see what you want to see, and you ignore the warning signs because the relationship feels comfortable. Brianna's family was complicated. Her parents divorced when she was 12, and she'd grown up bouncing between 2 households that couldn't stand each other. Her mom, Linda, remarried a guy named Frank, who was decent enough, and her dad, Roger, stayed single but bitter about everything. Brianna had an older sister named Megan, who was basically the golden child. Got the better grades, the better job, the better everything according to their parents. Megan was getting married to this guy named Colton, a successful real estate agent who came from a big family. Colton had 3 brothers and 2 sisters, all of them doing well for themselves. His brother Jalen was the one I'd end up having issues with, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Our relationship was good for the first 2 years. Really good. We moved in together after 18 months, split everything 50-50, and I thought we were building something solid. She'd come to my company's holiday parties, I'd suffer through her family dinners, and we'd talk about the future like it was actually going to happen. The first cracks appeared around the time Megan got engaged to Colton. Suddenly, Brianna was spending a lot more time with her sister, helping plan the wedding, attending engagement parties and bridal showers. I didn't mind. Family's important, and I figured she was just being a good maid of honor. But then she started mentioning Jalen. Jalen was Colton's younger brother. 27, worked as a personal trainer at some upscale gym, had the kind of physique that probably made his Instagram followers drool. He was married to a woman named Addison, who came from money and seemed to tolerate his existence more than enjoy it. They'd been married for about 4 years, no kids, and from what I could tell, lived pretty separate lives even while sharing a house. I met him at the engagement party and immediately got weird vibes. The guy was one of those dudes who's way too aware of his own appearance. Every time he passed a reflective surface, he'd check himself out. Talked about his workout routines like they were scientific breakthroughs. Made these subtle comments about other guys' fitness levels that were clearly meant to make himself look better by comparison. When I shook his hand, he held it a little too long and squeezed a little too hard. Classic power move from someone who needed to establish dominance. I let it go because I didn't want to make a scene at Megan's party, but I remember thinking this guy was trouble. At first, the mentions were innocent stuff. Oh, Jalen thinks the venue should have more parking. Jalen suggested this DJ for the reception. Jalen was really helpful when we were looking at centerpieces. Why the groom's brother was so involved in centerpiece selection, I had no idea. But whatever. Then, the texting started. I noticed it about 6 months before the wedding. Brianna would be on her phone constantly, smiling at messages, typing responses with her phone angled away from me. When I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd say, "Just Megan," or "wedding stuff," without looking up. The thing about being in a relationship for 3 years is you learn someone's patterns. Brianna never used to guard her phone. She'd leave it on the coffee table, hand it to me to look up directions, show me funny memes. Now it was practically glued to her hand, and she'd take it into the bathroom like it contained nuclear launch codes. I'm not the jealous type. Never have been. But I'm also not stupid. One night, about 4 months before the wedding, she fell asleep on the couch while we were watching a movie. Her phone buzzed on the cushion next to her, and I saw the notification. It was from someone saved in her contacts as wedding vendor. The preview read, "Can't stop thinking about you. Tomorrow can't come fast enough." Wedding vendors don't text like that. Not unless the wedding planning industry has gotten way more personal than I realized. I didn't wake her up, didn't confront her, just filed that information away and started paying closer attention. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more. She'd disappear for hours on Saturdays for wedding errands, but come back without shopping bags. She started going to the gym more often, specifically the gym where Jalen worked. She'd get defensive when I asked simple questions about her day. The real kicker came when I overheard part of a phone conversation. I'd come home early from work because we had to shut down for emergency repairs on one of the lifts. She didn't hear me come in, and she was in the bedroom with the door cracked open. I know, she was saying, but we have to be careful until after the wedding. Megan would lose her mind if she found out. And Addison? Yeah, exactly. Just a few more months, and then we can figure things out. I stood in the hallway for a solid minute, processing what I'd just heard. Then I quietly walked back to the front door, opened it loudly, and called out that I was home. By the time I got to the bedroom, she was off the phone and acting completely normal. That's when I knew I needed proof. Not for revenge, not yet, but because I knew that when I confronted her, she'd lie. She'd gaslight me. She'd make me feel crazy for suspecting anything. I needed receipts. Now let me be clear. I didn't hire anyone to investigate. I didn't hack her phone or install tracking software. I just started paying attention and documenting what I observed. Dates and times when she said she was somewhere, but her stories didn't add up. Screenshots of her public Instagram likes on Jalen's shirtless gym photos. Notes about the inconsistencies in her explanations. And then she got sloppy. About 2 months before the wedding, she left her tablet logged into her iCloud account. The tablet we shared for streaming movies. The tablet that now had all her messages synced to it. I wasn't even looking for them. I was trying to find where we'd bookmarked that documentary series we were watching. But there they were, synced right to the Messages app. Months of conversations with someone saved as Jay. I read through them over the course of a weekend when she was away at Megan's bridal shower. The conversations started innocent enough, discussing wedding logistics, making jokes about their siblings. But they escalated, fast. By month 2, they were openly flirting. By month 3, they were sharing things that made my stomach turn, talking about how they connected in ways their partners didn't understand, making plans to meet up at times that conveniently aligned with Brianna's gym sessions, using coded language that was so obvious it was almost insulting. There was one message from Jalen that really got me. Addison doesn't even notice when I'm not around. She's too busy with her charity boards and brunch clubs. You actually see me. And Brianna's response. Nate's the same way. He's so focused on his trucks and his routine. It's like being with furniture that pays half the bills. Furniture that pays half the bills. That's what I was to her. I screenshotted everything, saved it to a flash drive, made backup copies. Not because I was planning some elaborate revenge. At that point, I was still processing the betrayal, but because I knew I'd need proof when the gaslighting started. The screenshots filled up 3 folders on my computer. organized by date, categorized by content type. Part of me felt sick doing it, like I was invading her privacy, even though she was the one who'd violated our entire relationship. But the rational part of my brain, the part that had kept 40 trucks running smoothly for years, knew that documentation was protection. People lie. Evidence doesn't. I spent an entire weekend reading through those messages, going back to the beginning and watching the progression. It was like watching a car accident in slow motion. The initial friendly exchanges, the first flirtatious comment that crossed a line. The moment they started using code words and deleting certain messages they knew were too incriminating. Every stage was documented, and every stage made me feel more like a fool for not seeing it sooner. The confrontation happened 3 weeks before the wedding. I waited until we were both home on a Sunday evening, no distractions, no excuses to leave. Rex was sleeping in his bed in the corner, blissfully unaware that his human's life was about to get messy. I set my phone on the coffee table, pulled up one of the screenshots, and turned it toward her. Want to explain this? Her face went through about 6 different emotions in 3 seconds. Shock, then fear, then anger, then that calculated calm that manipulative people get when they're figuring out their angle. Were you going through my messages? She tried to sound outraged. They synced to the tablet we share. But that's not the point. And you know it. Nate, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. I read them. All of them. Months of them. She started crying. The performative kind, where the tears flow but the eyes stay calculating. It was just texting. Nothing physical ever happened. I swear to God, nothing physical happened. So you're saying I shouldn't be upset because you were only emotionally cheating on me for months? Because you were only planning to meet up with him behind my back? Because you only called me furniture that pays half the bills? She flinched at that one. Guess she forgot about that particular gem. Jalen and I have a connection, she said, actually having the audacity to defend it. We understand each other, but I never acted on it. I never crossed that line. The line was crossed the first time you hid a conversation from me. The line was crossed when you started lying about where you were going. The line was crossed when you decided our relationship wasn't worth basic honesty. You're overreacting. We're getting this out in the open now, and we can work through it. I'll stop talking to him. It's done. We can move past this. I laughed. Actually laughed. You think I'm going to trust you after this? You think you can just say, oops, my bad, and we go back to playing house? That's when she got desperate. Nate, please. The wedding is in 3 weeks. I'm the maid of honor. If we break up now, it'll ruin everything for Megan. Can we at least wait until after the wedding to figure this out? Ah, there it was. The real concern. Not our relationship, not the trust she'd shattered, but how breaking up would affect her sister's wedding, how it would look, how it would inconvenience her. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. You want me to pretend everything's fine, escort you to your sister's wedding, smile for photos, and act like you haven't been carrying on with the groom's brother for months. Then, after the wedding, we can figure things out. Is that the plan? When you say it like that, it sounds terrible. It sounds terrible because it is terrible, Brianna. She was full-on sobbing now, the real kind. Please, I'm begging you. Megan has been planning this wedding for 2 years. If this comes out, it'll destroy everything. And Addison, she doesn't know. Nobody knows. We can deal with us privately after the wedding, but please don't blow this up. I sat there for a long moment, watching her cry, feeling absolutely nothing. That's when you know it's really over. When you can watch someone you thought you loved fall apart, and you just feel empty. Here's what's going to happen, I said finally. I'm moving into the guest room tonight. I'll go to the wedding because I already RSVP'd, and I'm not going to waste the $200 I spent on a new suit. But after that, we're done. And I'm not lying for you. If anyone asks why I seem off, I'm not going to pretend everything's fine. What does that mean? Are you going to tell people? I'm not going to volunteer information, but I'm also not going to lie if someone asks me a direct question. You created this mess. You figure out how to navigate it. She tried arguing, tried negotiating, tried the tears again. None of it worked. I moved my stuff to the guest room and started looking at apartments. Rex seemed confused about why I was sleeping in a different room, but adapted quickly. Dogs are good like that. The next 3 weeks were awkward as all hell. We existed in the same house like strangers, exchanging only necessary communication about bills and logistics. She threw herself into wedding preparations with even more intensity, probably trying to distract herself from the implosion of her own relationship. I spent my time getting my affairs in order, found a nice one-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes from work, started quietly packing my things, made sure my name was off the lease we shared, since it was in her name anyway. Clean break, minimal drama, that was my plan. Then the wedding day arrived. The morning started early with Brianna rushing around the house getting ready for bridal party duties. We exchanged maybe 10 words total, all of them logistical. She left for the venue to help Megan prepare, and I took my time getting dressed, playing with Rex in the backyard, trying to mentally prepare for what was going to be an extremely uncomfortable day. I'd considered not going at all, just staying home, sending my apologies, avoiding the whole situation. But something stubborn in me refused to give her that easy out. She'd asked me to play along, to pretend everything was fine for her sister's sake. Well, I wasn't going to do that, but I also wasn't going to hide. I'd show up, I'd be civil, and I'd let whatever happened happen. The ceremony was at this fancy country club outside of town. White chairs set up on a manicured lawn, an arch covered in flowers that probably cost more than my monthly truck maintenance budget. Everyone was dressed to impress, and I have to admit, Megan looked genuinely happy as she walked down the aisle toward Colton. The vows were beautiful. All the usual promises about love and commitment and standing by each other through thick and thin. I caught myself feeling genuinely happy for them, even though I knew the hypocrisy happening just feet away. Megan deserved a good marriage. I just hoped Colton was actually the guy she thought he was. I was seated with Brianna's extended family since we were technically still together in the eyes of everyone there. Her mom, Linda, kept shooting me concerned looks, probably sensing something was off. I smiled and nodded and played my part. Her Aunt Patricia asked me about wedding planning and whether Brianna and I had set a date yet. I just said we were focused on getting through Megan's big day first, which was true, just not in the way Patricia assumed. But I was watching Jalen. He was one of Colton's groomsmen, standing up at the altar with this smug expression that made my fist itch. His wife Addison was in the second row, checking her phone more than watching the ceremony. They sat together at the reception but barely spoke to each other. The cracks in their marriage were visible if you knew where to look. Brianna was doing her maid of honor duties, adjusting Megan's train, holding her bouquet during the vows, tearing up at all the appropriate moments. She avoided eye contact with me almost entirely, which was fine by me. The reception was in the country club's ballroom. Open bar, live band, the whole 9 yards. I found my assigned seat at a table near the back with some of Brianna's cousins I'd met maybe twice before. They were nice enough, asking about my work and making small talk. That's when I noticed Jalen and Brianna having a conversation near the bar. They thought they were being subtle, but I saw the way he touched her elbow, the way she leaned in closer than necessary. Old habits die hard, I guess. Addison noticed too. She'd been watching them from across the room, her expression shifting from bored to alert to something colder. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw recognition there. She knew something was wrong. She just didn't know what yet. The speeches started after dinner. Colton's best man went first, his oldest brother, not Jalen, with a genuinely funny speech about their childhood. Then it was Brianna's turn. She stood up, all poise and polish, and delivered this beautiful speech about sisterhood and love and finding your person. I watched her perform, marveling at how easily the lies came to her, how she could talk about love and commitment while carrying on with a married man behind everyone's back. When she finished, everyone applauded. She made her way back to the head table, passing by Jalen on the way. Their hands brushed for just a second. Addison's eyes tracked the movement like a hawk spotting prey. After the speeches, people started mingling. The dance floor opened up, and the band played something slow. I excused myself from the table and headed toward the bar for a soda. That's where Addison found me. "You're Brianna's boyfriend, right?" she asked, sliding up next to me. Up close, she was objectively beautiful in that high-maintenance way. Perfect makeup, expensive dress, diamonds in her ears. But her eyes were tired. "That's me, Nate. Addison, Jalen's wife." She said it with a particular emphasis on wife that told me everything I needed to know about where her head was at. "Nice to meet you." "Is it?" She took a sip of her drink, something clear with lime. "I've been watching you watch them all night. You know something's going on, don't you?" I could have played dumb, could have shrugged it off and changed the subject, but I was so tired of pretending. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I know." Her jaw tightened. "How long?" "I found out about 3 weeks ago, but based on the messages I saw, it's been going on for months." Messages. It wasn't a question. Texts, lots of them. I have screenshots. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her drink like it held the answers to everything. When she looked up again, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. I suspected. The late nights at the gym, the phone always in his pocket. But I didn't have proof. "I can show you. If you want. Show me." We found a quiet corner near the coat check, and I pulled up the screenshots on my phone. I showed her the highlights, the flirtatious messages, the plans to meet up, the complaints about their respective partners. She read through them silently, her expression getting stonier with each swipe. When she got to one where Jalen talked about how invisible he felt with her, how Brianna made him feel alive, something in her face just shut down. I've given that man 7 years of my life, she said quietly. 7 years of supporting his career, managing our household, putting up with his family's chaos. And this is what I get. I'm sorry. I know this isn't how you wanted to spend your brother-in-law's wedding. She laughed bitterly. You know what the worst part is? I'm not even surprised. I'm just tired. Tired of pretending everything's fine. Tired of being the good wife while he does whatever he wants. So what do you want to do? She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. What do you want to do? I'd been thinking about that question for 3 weeks. Part of me wanted to just walk away cleanly. No drama, no confrontation, just a quiet exit. But another part of me, the part that had been called furniture by someone I thought loved me, wanted something more. Honestly, I want them to face consequences. Not violence or anything crazy, just I want people to see them for what they are. I'm tired of protecting liars. Addison nodded slowly. The toasts. There's an open mic after the formal speeches for anyone who wants to say something to the couple. Family tradition in Colton's family. I saw where she was going immediately. You want to say something? I want you to say something. You're the outsider here. You have less to lose than I do. And you have the receipts. It was a bad idea. The kind of idea that sounds satisfying in the moment, but leads to massive fallout. The kind of idea that would make me the villain in some versions of this story. But I thought about Brianna asking me to pretend everything was fine. About Jalen touching her arm like he had every right to. About being called furniture that pays half the bills. I won't read them out loud, I said finally. That's too nuclear. But I have another idea. We spent the next 20 minutes working out the details. Addison was surprisingly strategic, probably from years of navigating high society politics. By the time the open mic portion of the reception started, we had a plan. Colton's grandmother went first, a sweet old woman with a trembling voice who talked about how proud she was of her grandson. Then a college friend of Megan's shared a funny story about their freshman year. 2 more people went up with generic well wishes. Then I stood up. Brianna's eyes went wide when she saw me heading toward the microphone. I could see her calculating whether to stop me, but she was trapped at the head table with everyone watching. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Nate. I'm here as Brianna's +1. I smiled pleasantly, like I was about to give a normal toast. I wanted to say a few words about love and commitment. The room was quiet, attentive. Brianna looked like she might throw up. When Megan and Colton first got together, I remember Brianna telling me how excited she was. She said she'd never seen her sister so happy, so certain about a future with someone. That kind of certainty is rare. It's something you have to protect. I paused, making eye contact with Jalen for just a second. His smug expression was starting to crack. But here's the thing about trust. Once it's broken, it's almost impossible to repair. Every lie, every hidden text, every secret meeting, they add up. And eventually the truth comes out. It always does. The room was getting uncomfortable now. People were glancing around, sensing that this wasn't a normal toast. So to Megan and Colton, guard what you have. Be honest with each other, even when it's hard. And watch out for the people around you, because not everyone has your best interests at heart. I raised my glass. To the happy couple. May your marriage be built on the honesty and transparency that some people in this room seem to have forgotten. I took a sip and walked back to my seat. The applause was scattered and confused. Brianna was ghost white. Jalen was staring at me with something between fear and hatred. But the real show was about to start. Addison stood up next. She walked to the microphone with the poise of someone who'd attended 1,000 society events, her smile perfectly calibrated. I also wanted to say a few words. For those who don't know me, I'm Addison, married to Jalen, one of Colton's brothers. She paused, looking around the room with an expression that was almost serene. Marriage is interesting, isn't it? You think you know someone. You think you're building a life together. And then you discover that while you were planning the future, your husband was texting another woman about how invisible you make him feel. The gasp that went through the room was audible. Megan's mother actually stood up. Colton looked like he'd been hit with a baseball bat. I found out about an hour ago, Addison continued, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her, that my husband has been carrying on an emotional affair with the maid of honor for months, exchanging texts, meeting up secretly, complaining about their respective partners. Brianna burst into tears. Jalen jumped to his feet, shouting something about this being crazy, about Addison being jealous and paranoid. But Addison just kept going. I have the screenshots. Anyone who wants to see them can find me after this. I thought about keeping quiet, protecting the family image, not ruining Megan's special day. But you know what? I'm done being the good wife. I'm done pretending everything is fine when my husband treats our marriage like an inconvenience. She turned to look directly at Megan. I'm sorry. This isn't how your reception should have gone. But I refuse to spend another second lying for people who clearly don't deserve my protection. She set down the microphone and walked out of the ballroom. The next hour was absolute pandemonium. Megan was crying, a mix of anger, embarrassment, and genuine shock. Colton was trying to comfort her while simultaneously processing the fact that his brother had been having an affair with his wife's sister. Their parents were in damage control mode, trying to calm down guests and minimize the scene. Brianna tried to approach me once, mascara running down her face, stammering something about how I'd ruined everything. I just looked at her and said, "You ruined everything 3 months ago when you decided being faithful was too boring. I just stopped helping you hide it." Jalen confronted me in the parking lot about 20 minutes later while I was heading to my car. He was red-faced and furious, getting in my face about how I'd destroyed his marriage and humiliated him in front of everyone. I stood my ground. You destroyed your own marriage. I just showed people who you really are. He shoved me. Hard. I stumbled back against my car, and for a second I thought we were going to fight. But then 2 of Colton's other brothers appeared out of nowhere, grabbing Jalen and pulling him back. "That's enough," one of them said. I think it was the oldest one. The best man. "You've done enough damage today. Walk away." Jalen spit some choice words at me, but let himself be dragged off. I got in my car and drove home, adrenaline still pumping through my veins. Rex was thrilled to see me when I got back to the house. I took him for a long walk around the neighborhood, processing everything that had just happened. By the time we got back, I had a dozen texts and missed calls from various people involved in the drama. Brianna came home around midnight, still in her maid of honor dress, looking like she'd been crying for hours. "You humiliated me in front of my entire family," she said, standing in the doorway of the guest room where I was packing more of my things. "You humiliated yourself. I just stopped covering for you. This is so typical. You always have to be the victim. You always have to be right. Brianna, you cheated on me. You spent months lying to my face and texting another woman's husband, and somehow I'm the bad guy because I didn't help you hide it at your sister's wedding? It was her wedding day. You could have waited. You could have not cheated. Seems like the simpler solution." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something in her eyes shift. The manipulation wasn't working anymore. The tears weren't getting her sympathy. I was done, and she finally understood that. "Get out," she said quietly. "Get out of my house." "Gladly. I'll have my stuff out by tomorrow." I loaded up my car that night with the essentials and drove to my buddy Kevin's place. He let me crash on his couch with Rex, no questions asked until I was ready to talk about it. The aftermath was messier than I expected. The night of the wedding, my phone was blowing up with texts and calls from people I barely knew. Brianna's friends wanted to tell me what a horrible person I was. Some of Colton's relatives actually thanked me for exposing Jalen. Linda left me a voicemail asking what happened and why Brianna was having a breakdown at the hotel. I ignored all of it. Kevin let me crash at his place for 2 weeks while I finalized the apartment lease. His spare room was tiny and his roommate was loud, but it beat sleeping in my truck. Rex adapted quickly. Dogs are resilient like that. I went back to the house twice to collect my belongings, both times when I knew Brianna would be at work. Methodically packed everything that was mine, left everything that was hers, and didn't take a single thing we'd bought together. Clean break. Addison filed for divorce within the week. The screenshots I'd shared with her became Exhibit A in her divorce proceedings. Jalen's attempts to paint her as the crazy jealous wife fell apart when their lawyers got involved. She ended up with the house, most of their investments, and full custody of their 2 dogs. Jalen moved in with his parents, which at 27 is not a good look. Megan and Colton actually made it through, surprisingly. There was a lot of family therapy involved, from what I heard through the grapevine, and Colton essentially cut off Jalen completely. Megan blamed Brianna for almost ruining her wedding, and their sisterly relationship went from close to non-existent practically overnight. Brianna tried reaching out to me a few times over the following months. Texts that started apologetic and gradually became angry when I didn't respond. She blamed me for destroying her family relationships, for making her look bad, for taking Addison's side. She never once acknowledged what she'd actually done or took responsibility for any of it. I moved into my new apartment, got Rex settled in, and focused on work. The guys at the shop had heard bits and pieces about what happened. Word travels fast in small towns, but they were cool about it. Just the occasional joke about me being a wedding crasher, and then back to business as usual. Work became my therapy for those first few months. I'd arrive early, stay late, throw myself into complicated repair jobs that required all my concentration. There's something meditative about troubleshooting an engine problem, following the logic, testing theories, finding the solution. The apartment was smaller than the house but easier to manage. One bedroom, galley kitchen, small living room that I gradually furnished with stuff I actually liked. Rex got a corner of the living room for his dog bed, and I set up a small workbench by the window for weekend projects. My buddy Matt came over one Saturday to help me set up my new place. We were assembling this bookshelf from IKEA, cursing at the instructions when he asked how I was really doing. Honestly, better than I expected. I handed him a screwdriver. I think I'd been unhappy for a while without admitting it to myself. She never really saw me, you know. I was just convenient. Someone to split bills with while she waited for something better. Furniture that pays half the bills, Matt said, shaking his head. That's cold, dude. It was honest, at least. Probably the most honest thing she said to me in 3 years. Kevin showed up later with pizza, and we spent the evening watching football and not talking about feelings. Sometimes that's exactly what you need. Addison reached out to me about 2 months after the wedding. She wanted to thank me for sharing those screenshots and for backing her up when she confronted everyone. Her divorce was proceeding smoothly. Jalen had tried to fight it initially, but backed down when he realized how much evidence was stacked against him. We met for coffee at a place halfway between our respective towns. It was a little awkward at first. We'd only really talked that one time at the wedding before everything exploded, but she was surprisingly easy to talk to. I should have trusted my instincts sooner, she said during our conversation. I knew something was wrong for years, but I kept convincing myself I was paranoid. Thank you for giving me proof. You're the one who did the hard part. Getting up in front of everyone like that took guts. She laughed softly. I've been to so many events where everyone just smiles and pretends everything's perfect. I was done pretending, even if it made me the villain at a wedding reception. She told me about the divorce proceedings, about Jalen's pathetic attempts to claim she was making everything up, about how his own family had largely sided with her once they saw the evidence. The worst part wasn't the cheating, she admitted. It was the gaslighting. Being told I was crazy, paranoid, insecure, for years. That's what I'm most angry about. I understood exactly what she meant. We stayed in touch after that. Nothing romantic, just two people who understood what the other had been through. She started dating again about 6 months later. Some guy she met through a charity board. As for me, I threw myself into projects. Started restoring an old motorcycle I'd found at an estate sale, a 1982 Honda CB750 that needed everything. New carbs, new brakes, complete electrical overhaul. Spent my weekends in my garage with the radio on and Rex sleeping in the corner. Joined a softball league with some guys from work too. We were terrible, but it was fun. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.